After getting the cash flow for bond 1, let's repeat this activity for another bond to make sure we are good with that. So in activity 7, you are asked to create the cash flow for bond 3. Everything is exactly the same as bond 1, and it is just another activity. So here we see the cash flow for bond 3. Everything is the same as the previous one in terms of points, tricks, just the numbers are different. Here you have minus 1350 as the first deposit, as the value of the market value of the bond that you pay now. After 1 year, you start getting the interest rate. Since the par value is $1,000, so and the interest rate is 0.117050, so we get the interest as 117.5 for 7 years, because the years to maturity is 7 years, and finally at the end of year 7 you also get the par value, so it would be the cash flow for bond 3. With all these introduction that we discussed together regarding financial planning, now you should be fine to do a financial planning case for modeling. Let's check the financial planning case that we have for modeling. Hulit Corporation established an early retirement program as part of its corporate restructuring. At the close of the voluntary sign-up period, 68 employees had elected early retirement. As a result of these early retirements, the company incurs the following obligations over the next 8 years. As you can see in the table, the obligations are some monetary payments that the company is obliged regarding the early retirement of 68 employees. It means that at the beginning of year 1, because it is mentioned, as you can see here, the cash requirement, it is in thousands of dollars, are due at the beginning of each year. So it's one of the points about this problem. So it means that this $430,000, that for simplicity, we just ignore the K part and we just focus on that 430. So at the beginning of year 1, it means now. They need to pay $430. At the beginning of year 2, they must pay 210. At the beginning of year 3, and like that it continues. So when you see here 255, it means that at the beginning of year 8. So here we have everything. As you can see, they are beginning of each year. It is mentioned here. And remember, they all followed the same logic at the activities we started together. You see, it is a cash flow and it says that at these times they need to give this money. Okay, what's the problem? So, okay, they can sum up all this money and put it over here. But no, the problem is not that much simple as we had it before, because they don't want to put some inactive money in a bank account and with that they pay these things. They want to invest the money. So in that situation, they are gonna deposit the minimum amount of money in the bank to cover all these obligations. So that's the point. They want to invest their money. What are the investment options they have? Here there are the investment options. We discussed them before separately. So let's read it together. The corporate treasurer must determine how much money must be set aside today to meet the 8 yearly financial obligations as they come due. So the financing plan for the retirement program includes investment in government bonds as well as savings. The investment in government bonds are limited to 3 choices. As you can mention in the previous one, everything starts from the beginning of year 1. Start from beginning of year 1 to the beginning of year 8. So here when it says meet the 8 yearly financial obligation, is because of that point. I'm just emphasizing this point because maybe it has come to your mind that there are only 7 years of planning. Why we are talking about 8? The reason is this: it's a start from the beginning of year 1 and it start from that. It gets itself to 8. So that's the reason for this 8. You can consider it some sort of typo, but it's not important and it doesn't have any effect on the mathematical modeling that we are doing. Okay, the government bonds have par value of $1,000. These are those details that we need to know when we want to do the modeling, which means that even with different prices, each bond pays $1,000 at maturity. We discussed these things. The rates shown are based on the par value. For purpose of planning, the treasurer assumed that any funds not invested in bonds will be placed in savings, and each interest and while the savings earn interest at an annual rate of 4%. Build the mathematical model to minimize the cost of satisfying a company's obligations to its early retirement plan. So, in fact, it says very similar to activity 1, but in a sophisticated way. It says that how much is the minimum amount of money that we can invest in the bonds and the saving accounts and be able to cover all these obligations. That's the point of that. So in fact, while we are checking this, already we know what is the objective function. Here is some points about the planning case before we start doing the modeling to make sure we all are on the same page. It is not as straightforward and understandable as the previous cases and needs more reflection, of course. So if you think you are not caught up, just stop the video and replay to make sure you know everything well. Pay attention that they want to assign an amount of money now that could satisfy all the demands during the following, in fact, it is 7 years, in the following 7 years to get to 8 years. The current, and I told you about the delicate point here, the current deposit obviously is less than the summation of all the monetary demands, since the deposit is invested risk-free that would generate money that must be considered in the calculation. Here it talks about, because in activity 1, if you remember, since there was no interest, we very easily sum up the costs and we came up to 500 for activity 1. But here it says that the summation of all the cash flows that we have, that is here. For example, 430, 210, 222, 231, and like that. If you sum all of them, the number that you have, the value that you have, of course, is greater than the minimum deposit. Why? Because the minimum deposit that you make will get income because of bonds interest and saving interest. So you need to just figure out how to distribute this money among these options, investment options, to get the most out of them. And another point that is very important is that bonds could be only purchased now at the beginning of year one. In fact, you are not going to trade the bonds. You buy the bonds now, you invest in them, but you can change the amount of money you put in the saving accounts. Let's do it together. Now we are ready to do the first part. When we are doing a mathematical model, is decision variables. Decision variables are something that you want the model, after being solved, tells you. What are those decision variables? Those controllable things that you can control, that can contribute to your objective function, and it is something that you want to hear. You want the model specify for you. What is that? Before you check the answer and listen to the objective functions that I will show you, check it and make sure you have your own list of decision variables in front of, sorry, not objective function, decision variables in front of you, and after that you can check them. But remember, my friends, apart from this definition that you see here, controllable input, decision alternatives specified by the decision maker, such as the number of units of a product to produce. Here, what are the decision variables? What are the things? What are the question marks for the decision makers that they want the mathematical model, decision science helps them with? What is the things that they are thinking about? You may say that, okay, the decision variable is the amount of money they want to invest at the beginning, the minimum amount of deposit. No, that cannot be the decision variable, because as it is mentioned here, as you can see here, it says that minimizing the cost of satisfying a company's obligation to its early retirement program is the objective function. So what are the decision variables? Decision variables are these. We have 4 decision variables, units of, not 4 decision, 4 category of decision variables. We have B1, B2, B3. B1 is the units of bond 1 purchased at the beginning of year 1, the only time that you can buy bonds. So the number of bond 1, the number of bond 2, and the number of bond 3 are decision variables, plus the amount of money you invest in saving account at the beginning of year 1, at the beginning of year 2, at the beginning of year 3, at the beginning of year 4, at the beginning of year 5, at the beginning of year 6, and at the beginning of year 7 are the decision variables. When the model gives you about the things, you quickly know what you should do as the manager. You go and quickly buy, for example, B1 units of bond 1, B2 units of B2, B3 units of B3, and invest the rest for the first year in a saving account. These things are decision variables. Now you are 100% sure how you need to invest your money when you have the answer to these variables that are called decision variables.